Hello everyone, my name is Steven and welcome to Storytime. Today we're going to be reading some malicious compliance stories, tales where following the rules can lead to some just desserts. And let me just say, if you're not already subscribed to Storytime, please consider doing so, but with that being said, let's sit back, relax, and listen to some captivating Reddit stories. Delivering a little malicious compliance to my entitled aunt. This happened back in 2003 when I was 19. My aunt, who you may know from some of my other posts, was trying to do a little social climbing by joining an elite kiddie party club. For those of you who don't know what a kiddie party is, it's pretty much a gathering of brain-dead trophy wives who come together to brag about how they're spending money that their husbands have made. The kiddie refers to the amount collected at the party, every member contributing a certain sum of money each month. The kitty is handed over to one member of the group every month. Anyway, the club my aunt had joined had some high society ladies, including my uncle's boss's wife, as its members. This club had a rule to always have home-cooked food at their gatherings. Said home-cooked food would, of course, be provided by the one hosting the gathering. Now, as the other women were healthy enough to be able to afford servants, this wasn't a problem for them. But when my aunt was to host the gathering, as a new member, she was panic-stricken. You see, my aunt couldn't cook to save her life. She's the kind of cook who lends flavor to her food by smothering everything in butter or by drowning her desserts in sugar. Needless to say, she couldn't serve such abominations to her new overlords. I don't like to toot my own horn. Freak it, I most certainly do. But I'm a very good cook. Even at age 19, my culinary skills were admirable. It's one of my hobbies and I love it. Aunt knew this, of course, and decided to implore and emotionally blackmail or try to goad me into preparing the food for her. Food that she would pass on as products of her cooking. This expletive had never praised my cooking before. In fact, she would go out of her way to find faults where none existed. When I brought this up, she said she was just pushing me to do better. When I refused, she decided to go to my father. She went on and on about how it was my summer break, and as I didn't have college classes to attend, I could probably find the time to do it. My dad told her it was a huge task and I shouldn't be compelled to do it, and told Aunt that she shouldn't try to deceive her new friends like this. When she suggested that my stepmom do it, Dad shot that down too. But that idiot just wouldn't quit. The party was 4 days away, and for 3 of those days she would call my dad several times a day to beg him to convince either me or my stepmom to cook for the party. I was ticked and decided to teach her a lesson by doing exactly what she wanted. I told her I would cook for her party, but only if she paid for the ingredients that would be used. I would shop for them myself. Aunt was ecstatic and agreed to my terms. The items, as per my aunt's specifications, included malai kofta, muglai aloo, maki dal, raita, and for dessert, gulab jamun and kajurka halwa. I would strongly suggest that you Google these items to know exactly what they are in order to gain a better understanding of what happened later. My aunt knew for a fact that I was pretty good at preparing all of these dishes and was confident that she would get tons of compliments. She said she would make the roadies bread herself. It was the one thing she could cook well. My stepmom offered to help, but I declined. I would be doing this for my beloved auntie all by my little self. The party was to start at noon, but as lunch was going to take a bit longer than expected, part of my plan, I told her I would bring it over to her place myself. She was annoyed, but agreed. I packed and loaded everything into my dad's car and drove over to her place. I got there at the nick of time. As soon as I was done emptying the food into various pots and pans and Aunt had set the table, the trophy witches had started pouring in. This meant that my aunt would not have the chance to taste the food. Perfect. My aunt rushed me out the door, lest the aristocrats catch a glimpse of the peasant. That very day, in the late afternoon, my aunt came over once again. Her eyes were swollen, indicating that she had been crying. She demanded to speak to me, even as my dad and stepmom tried to calm her down and asked her what was wrong. I was in my room. Her screams told me that my mission had been a success. When I stepped into the living room, Aunt went into details about how disgusting the food was. The malai kofta was smelly because I allowed the cottage cheese to rot, and the gravy was so spicy it could burn your mouth. The potatoes used in the Mughlai aloo were rotten. I couldn't help but think of the smile on the vegetable vendor's face when I told him I would buy the potatoes that were going bad. The pulses in the maki dal were hard as nails because I hadn't steamed them properly. There were date pits in the khajur ka halwa. Khajur means dates, and yes, I had left the pits in there on purpose. And the gulab jamun were hard as rocks. That's because I had left them in hot oil for way longer than is recommended. I let her go on about how I was good for nothing and how I could never do anything right. How the other ladies were so displeased with her and had left early before making a few snide remarks about how they needed to go get some real food. Her husband's boss's wife had been particularly acidic. I don't remember exactly what she said to her, but it was enough to crush my aunt. After she was done, I made the most innocent face and asked her why she was upset with me over food that she had cooked. Surely it must have been her cooking as she was the one hosting the event. My stepbrother couldn't hold in his snicker and Aunt left in a huff after Dad told her she had no right to yell at me after making me take on a humongous task that she was supposed to perform. Later that day, my dad told me he knew I had done all of this on purpose, and though he understood why, he couldn't condone my actions. As I had to maintain the good girl facade, I nodded in agreement. And had to quit the club in less than 2 weeks as the other members just would not lay off with the snark and catty comments about the disastrous meal she had cooked. Icing on the cake, she couldn't even defend herself as, in order to do so, she would have to admit to being a lying liar who lies. There's so much bad blood and history going on between OP and their aunt, and they sound really snobby and snotty and just above everybody else. So needless to say, I think Aunt had it well coming her way. Manager tries to pass the buck, we do her due diligence and make life much harder. Back in 20 mumble, I worked as second-level internet support for a Canadian telecom company, not one of the big three. We were responsible for handling trouble tickets that couldn't be resolved by the frontline phone agents, answering technical questions from SAME, and dealing with the occasional, "Please God, fix this right now," from the customer service managers. This particular incident involved a customer who had been complaining the ears off our entire call center because he felt his internet speeds were not up to snuff. We had looked at his line several times and applied such tweaks to the signal as we felt would help without compromising the stability of the line. After all, there's not much point in improving your line speed from 3 megabits per second to 6 megabits per second if you also lose signal every 20 minutes, right? One of the managers just would not take that as our final answer, and one night ended up blasting my colleague on our departmental mailing list for not caring about customer service and hanging the frontline reps out to dry. I guess this particular customer had been blowing up her voicemail, and rather than doing her job and due diligence, she tried to roll crap uphill. Colleague came to me to confer on the best way to handle this as we were swing shift and our own managers were unavailable until the next morning. The perils of residential support. The two of us pulled up the account history of support tickets and then pulled up the billing history as well and found something interesting. Although the line was supporting 3 to 4 megabits per second comfortably, and the customer was pushing for 6 plus, the account plan being charged was for 1.5 megabits per second, a significantly cheaper option. 10 minutes later, we sent that manager a screenshot of the account billing plan and a note that in compliance with the restrictions of the service plan the customer had signed up for, their internet speed had now been capped at 1.5 megabits per second, and pleased to have a lovely evening. Sadly, we did not get to hear the next call she made to the customer, but I bet it was a real joy. What a lazy thing. How hard is it to check what plan they're actually signed up for before escalating it so hard? And why was the customer even trying that hard when they're obviously signed up for a cheaper option than what they're trying to get? I guess they're trying to pull a fast one over them or something? I don't know. But I think this is just bad management overall. If you want to take work from the ER, you're never gonna sleep. My dad was a general surgeon in the ER. The hospital was collecting some internal info on who was doing what jobs, and it turned out that the ER was having a lot of non-cardio specializing doctors doing EKGs. The reason for this was pretty simple. The cardiologists tend to be busy, and the results in the ER have to be read really fast. In order to be fast, they'd just read the EKGs themselves, as the results generally weren't subtle. It can be hard to tell some heart problems from others, but in the ER, all you really need is a quick peek to go, "Ah crap, this guy is having a heart attack." The cardiology department got upset about this and said that ER doctors shouldn't get paid for doing EKGs as it isn't their specialty. The ER management was pretty chill, so they said they didn't really care who did the EKG, they just needed the results to be in within 30 minutes of them being requested. For the first few days, this just resulted in the doctors on the floor reading the EKGs unpaid. Not a huge deal, but kind of a nuisance. Then, during a night shift, my dad sold the other ER docs on an idea. The first part of the idea comes from a hospital policy. Technically, if a patient came in with chest pain, you had to do an EKG. The ER was infamous for being swamped, so management turned a blind eye to the actual enforcement of this policy there as a way to save time. If someone comes in with chest pain and a hacking cough, for example, they're probably not having a heart attack. They probably have pneumonia, and you should start your diagnostic with that. This, combined with the second part of the idea, which was what if they actually rigorously enforce the first policy and ask for an EKG on all chest pain patients, while following the second policy of handling the EKGs to the cardio department. Either cardio crumbles first and lets them just do their dang just, or management crumbles first and removes the silly EKG rule. Either result is a win, easy peasy. Thus began the most brutal 2 days of the cardiology department's life. The ER handles a much larger flow of patients than the cardiology department is prepared to deal with. They're a specialist division, so they're not supposed to handle a particularly large volume of patients in a single day. This meant that they quickly got swamped by the sheer flow of patients in from the ER. Oh, but it gets worse. ER docs work ungodly hours, and when the staff set up the deal, there was the agreement that the cardiologists had to get the results back within 30 minutes, and the cardiologists were getting a request for an EKG reading every 25 minutes. They could handle the reading that fast, but as the doctors were on call, they'd get only another 15 minutes or so to try and sleep before they'd get woken up to read another chart. Again and again and again. By my dad's guess, the ER kept the entire cardiology department up for about 40 consecutive hours before they begged for a surrender. A second meeting was held, and the cardiologists demanded to be released from the previous policy. This was granted, and peace returned to the hospital. I don't see what the problem is here. They asked for it, they got it, and then they realized how bad of an idea it was. When you realize the plan is bad, you let them stick through it, realize themselves it's bad, and it goes back to what it should have been the entire time. Gotta respect the speed limit. I live on a long, hilly rural road. It has a 45 mph speed limit and is a no passing zone the entire way. It's illegal, unsafe, and nearly impossible to pass someone no matter how slowly they're going. Because it's a quiet road and away from the town, the locals will normally drive 50 to 55 mph. This was fine until the police started setting speed traps. Because the road is so hilly, it's easy to accidentally go 55 mph when going downhill. This is how they got me, and a lot of my neighbors. Okay, fine, it is technically speeding. But I leave work around the time they start heading back home, so I either see them fly ahead of me at 60 mph or tailgate me the entire way home. It pees me off. So I started driving the speed limit. Exactly the speed limit. 45 mph down the entire stretch of road. When we come to those sharp turns, I go all the way down to the 20 mph suggested speed. Almost every night, a cop gets stuck behind me the entire way, and there's no way for them to pass me. They also can't turn on another road because all the others are just gravel back roads that lead to farms. My long, hilly road is their only route. It definitely pees them off. They will turn their brights on and weave around their lane to try and get me to speed up. As soon as I turn onto my driveway, they gun it. I've even had one turn his lights on to make me pull over, only for him to speed past me and drive ahead. It's probably not smart to inconvenience a cop, but what else am I supposed to do? I'm just respecting the speed limit. It's probably not the smartest thing, but it is the kind of thing that I would like to do. If somebody was tailgating me at all, I'd probably want to slow down to a speed that I feel is safe with the distance they're giving me and force them to be upset or try and go around me or whatever. But main thing is making sure that I'm okay and that everything is fine, and especially not letting them speed me up because they're trying to tailgate me or force me into some error somehow and get in a really bad situation. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for listening to and watching the Storytime channel. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and leave any feedback you can in the comments below. Thank you all again for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.